Hi, it's time for a chime video. So today we have something special and I think it will be interesting. This is a chime base for a NuTone model K35 two-note door chime with clock. And this particular K35 was manufactured in 1956. A fellow sent it in to me for repair. Came with the original box, came with all the packing materials inside, some mounting screws here, and the original mounting screws in its little envelope from 1956. It also came with the original installation instructions, which I will copy or scan and post online. It explains how to install it, explains how to wire it up, and all of that's really great. This form was printed originally, looks like 1949. They've made this style of chime for a long time. I don't think this was actually a completely new old stock chime because it is kind of dusty on the inside. And if it had been sealed up in its box since it was made, it wouldn't be dusty. I have a feeling that this was probably a display chime. It was in someone's store or shop or something like that. It was something that consumers or customers could come in and take a look at and see if they wanted to buy one just like it and take one home with them probably. This video is not going to be so much about the chime as it is about the clock. I have this cleaned up and I have it wired to a button just to show you. It's a nice sounding chime. It resonates nicely. Mostly because it's an all metal construction with metal resonators, so it sounds really, really good. But what we're actually going to talk about today is we're going to talk about the clock, because that's one of the real reasons why the fellow sent it to me to have me work on it. The clock face of a K35 is one of the most mid-century modern or atomic design clocks that I think NuTone ever made. It's a very simple design, but it gets the point across very nicely. You have, in this particular case, sort of a brushed aluminum frame. You have perforated white painted metal panel. You have these really cool red and black dots to make up the numbers for the clock. And then you have your hands and a sweep second hand in red. It's very, very mid-century modern looking. Now this particular clock was sent in because the fellow who bought all of this said that while the clock ran, it was noisy. And I have a feeling that he has extra sensitive hearing, because while it did make some noise, and it was more than average, I didn't think it was that objectionable. If you were 3 or 4 feet away from it, I couldn't really hear it. But some people have better hearing than I do, so who am I to complain? The thing about this particular clock, if like most NuTone clocks, if you were to send it in to me because it was noisy, we would disassemble the Telecron gear drive assembly for the clock, clean everything, lubricate everything, put it all back together, and usually it would work as good as new. This one is different. This particular K35 has one of these clock assemblies. This is a sealed synchronous motor attached to the clock gear drive mechanism inside the metal case. When these have a problem, these aren't really serviceable. They weren't designed to be serviced. I think they were designed simply to be replaced. Now, what I did with this, and maybe I can show you, we'll take the hands off. And then we have to pop out the little straps to hold the cover in. And I don't necessarily recommend that you do this yourself, because in some respects there isn't any real point to it. Take that off, and then the cover plate comes off, and inside are the gears. And you might be thinking, oh no, the gears all fell out. What's he going to do? I just put it back together. I had all this all apart. So the gears came out. They are copper colored gears, but they are not actually copper. It's, I think, some kind of finish so they don't corrode. One of the gears, oops, we do want to keep them in order like that. This gear on the back of this stack of 4 gears. This one is a fiber gear, and that's the one that meshes into the gear that comes out of the motor. This was all taken apart. It was all perfectly clean. I did lubricate it all because it's 1956. Well, you know, it's more than 65 years old. Might have needed a little bit of lubrication. Did all of that, put it all back together. But unfortunately, the noise inside this is not from the gears, it's from the motor. And the motor is a sealed unit. I did try to get some lubrication down into there, but it's made really well, and I don't think the lubrication made it to the interior part of the motor, and you can't really take the motor apart because the motor, and it's a little hard to see or perhaps impossible, but if you look around here, the steel part of the motor case is actually like spot welded to the metal of the gear case. So you can't take it apart. It's not designed to be taken apart. There isn't much you can do with this. One of the other problems is, and you see this on this type of motor, and I've seen it on other things with motors also. You have a motor here that has become noisy. That motor is in a steel enclosure that's welded to a bigger steel enclosure with a cover plate over it. Never mind about the gears and stuff right now. All of those metal enclosures with airspace inside of it acts somewhat like a drum, and it amplifies the sound that the motor's making. And there just isn't a lot you really can do about that. And I told the customer that we may not be able to do anything with this. He said, well, I have an idea if you're willing to do it. And we discussed it. And I said, sure, I think I can work that out for you. So what did we do? We removed all of this, obviously. And here we have the clock with hands. And actually, on the back, I replaced the 16-volt motor assembly with a battery-operated quartz movement. Now, this is not something that we do very often, and it's not necessarily something that I'm the biggest fan of to do in the world, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Now, there are some ins and outs to doing this and choosing wisely so your end result is nearly as good as what it was when it was brand new. If we pop our battery back in, you can watch it go around while I talk about it. So when you choose a quartz movement, you have to choose wisely. First requirement for this one was the original motor and clock on a K35 has a sweep second hand. And that's what it's doing now. It's sweeping. The second hand is not one of those quartz ones that goes tick, 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 and it moves once every second. It sweeps around. And it was important to the owner of the clock to make sure that it appeared to be as original as possible. So that was a requirement. Finding a quartz movement with a sweep second hand instead of one that ticks. The other thing that's important is the choice of hands. Now, this is where it becomes somewhat complicated. Now, I know there are many places that you can go online and buy quartz movements. Some of them, like on Amazon, you can buy a quartz movement for as little as $3 or $4. And whether those quartz movements are better than the one I chose for this that came from a clock company that sells quartz movements, I don't really know. I don't have any way to judge it. I'm not a quartz movement expert, and probably whoever you would ask would tell you whatever they sold was the best. So I don't really know. But there's lots of different choices in quartz movements, and they're all roughly, they all look a lot alike, and they almost all work on a AA battery. But there are some considerations. So one is the length of the stem that protrudes through the front of the clock where the hands attach. And they come in a variety of different lengths. You can get really short ones, you can get medium ones, long ones, extra long ones, lots of different sizes. So you can choose something that will work the best with the clock that you're going to install it on. I chose one with a medium length shaft, knowing that I could make some shim washers, put some shim washers between the front of the motor case here and where it goes through the opening in the grill. And what I did to make it look good, because that's part of all of this, was I used a couple large fender washers. Fender washers are big diameter with regular size holes in the middle. And I also got some felt adhesive pads in white, because the perforated metal grill is white and I don't want it to show up. If you put black, then you would see the little black dots, and we don't want to do that. We want it to look as original as possible. So I got some white felt pads and punched some holes in the middle of it and made sort of a washer felt pad sandwich to move the motor back off the back of the clock face a little bit. Now I could do that because there's a ton of room inside the chime where this gets mounted, so that's not a problem, because the original one is that thick and this one is much thinner. So I had a lot of space. That helped out a lot also. Once I chose the company I wanted to buy the quartz movement from and which quartz movement I wanted to buy with the sweep secondhand, because that was a requirement, the next choice has to do with the hands. Now, in the world of clocks, there are, I don't know, approximately 1 million different kinds of handsets that you could choose from. And a lot of the really inexpensive quartz movements that you buy on some places online that will remain nameless, Amazon, sometimes you buy a quartz movement and you get 12 different sets of hands in all different sizes and things. And I assume it's an easy way to sell it. The hands in those cases are usually pretty thin and flimsy and not always the right style or the right size. So let's talk about size for a second. These are the original hands. In fact, we're going to put these here on the original instruction sheet so you can see them better. So here we have the hour hand, the minute hand, and the second hand. And the hour and minute hand are in black, and they have these little elongated triangle shapes. And the second hand is in red. It has a pointer at this end, and it has a round circle at this other end. Sometimes, and if you look carefully, clock hands are somewhat balanced in the way they are made. You always have a portion of the hand from the opening where it fits onto the clock mechanism. You always have a tail on the hand to help balance out the length that points towards the numbers. Same thing is true for the second hand. Clock hands come in different lengths, and when you measure for clock hands, apparently you always measure from the hole to the long part of the tip. And you want hands that are appropriately sized for the clock face that you're going to put them on. So, for instance, this particular hand, if it was 2 inches longer, it would be too long and it would overrun the numbers on the clock face. Same thing is true for the second hand. It has to be the right length, and style matters also. There's all different kinds of styles of hands, and you're never really going to find something that's precisely the same as what the original hands were, because things change over time and these hands were made for this particular clock. But we needed to find something that was pretty close so the style of the clock would be retained. What I think I came up with was pretty good. So the hour and the minute hands are very similar in design to the original hands. They are somewhat of an elongated triangle. They are sort of clipped off here towards the center where it attaches to the clock mechanism and has this little curvy detail, which is kind of nice. And they're not quite as long, but they are long enough that it's easy to tell what it's pointing to. So that's not a big problem. Reading an analog clock is something most people can do, unless of course you're under like 15 and then maybe you don't know how to read a clock anymore. I'm not sure. I thought the hands were a good choice, and then the second hand is somewhat longer than the original second hand, but the choice of second hands was more limited, especially if you needed a red one. Now, I suppose I could have bought a black one and I could have spray painted it, but I didn't really want to do that. I think all in all, the choice of hands was good. Once I got it all, it was relatively simple to put together. I did have to enlarge the hole in the mesh face of the clock and make it a little bit bigger around so the stem of the clock would fit through it, and then it's held in place with a brass washer and a brass nut, which came with the quartz movement, and then the hands are installed, and so on and so on. So it's fairly straightforward. This has been on the workbench running since midday last Friday, so it's been 3 full days, and it of course keeps perfect time. Now, one of the things about quartz movements will be, how long does the battery last? I don't really know. I would imagine, based on a clock that I have with a quartz movement, the battery will last probably about a year. So that's not too bad. Every now and then you're going to have to replace the battery, but if you want your clock to work properly and keep good time, that's not too bad. So that's sort of the ins and outs of modernizing the clock on a NuTone K35 door chime. And I think all in all, he'll be very happy with how this turned out. He said in an email when I told him I had gotten the clock parts in that he was very excited to see what it was going to look like and what kind of hands I chose. And I think these work out pretty well. I hope you found this interesting, and perhaps for someone it will be helpful. If it is, give it a thumbs up on YouTube, because that'll help us just a little bit. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell. When you click on the bell, click on it to receive all notifications, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification and you can watch it. That's all for today. See you on the next video.